The complete works of Swami Vivekananda, The Vedanta, lecture delivered by Swami Vivekananda at Lahore in 1897, part 12. You may be astonished to hear that as practical Vedantists, the Americans are better than we are. I used to stand on the seashore at New York and look at the emigrants coming from different countries, crushed, downtrodden, hopeless, unable to look a man in the face, with a little bundle of clothes as all their possessions, and these all in rags. If they saw a policeman, they were afraid and tried to go to the other side of the footpath. And mark you, in 6 months, those very men were walking erect, well clothed, looking everybody in the face. And what made this wonderful difference? Say this man comes from Armenia or somewhere else where he is crushed down beyond all recognition, where everybody told him he was born a slave and born to remain in a low state all his life, and where at least move on his part he was trodden upon. There everyone told him, as it were, slave, you are a slave, remain so. Hopeless you were born, hopeless you must remain. Even the very air murmured round him, as it were, there is no hope for you. Hopeless and a slave you must remain. While the strong man crushed the life out of him, and when he landed in the streets of New York, he found a gentleman, well dressed, shaking him by the hand. And it made no difference that he was in rags and the other well clad. He went a step further and saw a restaurant, that there were gentlemen dining at the table, and he was asked to take a seat at the corner of the same table. He went about and found a new life, that there was a place where he was a man among men. Perhaps he went to Washington, shook hands with the President of the United States, and perhaps there he saw men coming from different villages, peasants and ill-clad, all shaking hands with the President. Then the veil of Maya slipped away from him. He is Brahman, he who has been hypnotized into slavery, and weakness is once more awake, and he rises up and finds himself in a world, a man in the world of men. Aye, in this country of ours, the very birthplace of the Vedanta, our masses have been hypnotized for ages into that state. To touch them is pollution. To sit with them is pollution. Hopeless they were born, hopeless they must remain. And the result is that they have become, and they have been sinking, sinking and sinking, and have come to the very last stage to which a human being can come. For what country is there in the world where man has to sleep with the cattle? And for this, blame nobody else. Do not commit the mistake of the ignorant. The effect is here and the cause is here too. We are to blame. Stand up, be bold, and take the blame on your own shoulders. Do not go about throwing mud at others. For all the faults you suffer from, you are the sole and the only cause. Young men of Lahore, understand this, therefore. This great sin, hereditary and national, it is on our shoulders. There is no hope for us. You may make thousands of societies, 20,000 political assemblages, 50,000 institutions. These will be of no use until there is that sympathy, that love, that heart that thinks for all. Until Buddha's heart comes once more into India, until the words of the Lord Krishna are brought into their practical use, there is no hope for us. You go on imitating the Europeans and their societies and their assemblages. But let me tell you a story, a fact that I saw with my own eyes. A company of Burmans was taken over to London by some persons here who turned out to be Eurasians. They exhibited these people in London, took all the money, and then took these Burmans over to the continent and left them there for good or evil. These poor people did not know a word of any European language, but the English consul in Austria sent them over to London. They were helpless in London without knowing anyone, but an English lady got to know of them, took these foreigners from Burma into her own house, gave them her own clothes, her bed and everything, and then sent the news to the papers. And mark you, the next day the whole nation was, as it were, aroused. Money poured in and these people were helped out and sent back to Burma. On this sort of sympathy are based all their political and other institutions. It is the rock foundation of love, for themselves at least. They may not love the world, and the Burmans may be their enemies. But in England, it goes without saying that there is great love for their own people, for truth and justice and charity to the stranger at the door. I should be the most ungrateful man if I did not tell you how wonderfully and how hospitably I was received in every country in the West. Where is the heart here to build on? No sooner do we start a little joint stock company than we try to cheat each other, and the whole thing comes down with a crash. We talk of imitating the English and building up as a big nation as they are. But where are the foundations? Ours are the only sand, and therefore the building comes down with a crash in no time. Therefore, young men of Lahore, raise once more that mighty banner of the Advaita, for on no other ground can you have that wonderful love until you see the same Lord is present everywhere. Unfurl that banner of love, arise, awake, and stop not till the goal is reached. Arise, arise once more, for nothing can be done without renunciation. If you want to help others, your little self must grow. In the words of the Christian, you cannot serve God and Mammon at the same time. Have Vairagya. Your ancestors gave up the world for doing great things. At the present time, there are men who give up the world to help their own salvation. Throw away everything, even your own salvation, and go and help others. Aye, you are always taking bold words, but here is practical Vedanta before you. Give up this little life of yours. What matter it if you die of starvation? You and I and thousands like us, so long as this nation lives. The nation is sinking. The curse of unnumbered millions is in our hands. Those to whom we have been giving ditch water to drink, when they have been dying of thirst and while the perennial river of water was flowing past. The unnumbered millions whom we have allowed to starve in sight of plenty. The unnumbered millions to whom we have talked of Advaita and whom we have hated with all our strength. The unnumbered millions for whom we have invented the doctrine of Lokachar, to whom we have talked theoretically that we are all the same and all are one with the same Lord without even an ounce of practice. Yet, my friends, it must only be in the mind and never in practice. Wipe off this blot. Arise and awake. What matters if this little life goes? Everyone has to die, the saint or the sinner, the rich or the poor. The body never remains for anyone. Arise and awake and be perfectly sincere. Our insincerity in India is awful. What we want is character, that steadiness and character that makes a man cling on to a thing like grim death. Let the sages blame or let them praise. Let Lakshmi come today or let her go away. Let death come just now or in 100 years. He indeed is a sage who does not make one false step from the right path. Arise and awake, for the time is passing and all our energies will be frittered away in vain talking. Arise and awake. Let minor things and quarrels over little details and fights over little doctrines be thrown aside. For here is the greatest of all works. Here are the sinking millions. When the Mohammedans first came to India, what a great number of Hindus were here. But mark how today they have dwindled down. Every day they will become less and less till they wholly disappear. Let them disappear. But with them will disappear the marvelous ideas of which, with all their defects and all their misrepresentations, they still stand as representatives. And with them will disappear this marvelous Advaita, the crest jewel of all spiritual thought. Therefore, arise, awake with all your hands stretched out to protect the spirituality of the world. And first of all, work it out for your own country. What we want is not so much spirituality as a little of the bringing down of the Advaita into the material world. First bread and then religion. We stuff them too much with religion when the poor fellows have been starving. No dogmas will satisfy the cravings of hunger. There are two curses here. First, our weakness. Second, our hatred, our dried up hearts. You may talk doctrines by the millions. You may have sects by the hundreds of millions. But it is nothing until you have the heart to feel. Feel for them as your Veda teaches you, till you find that they are parts of your own bodies. Till you realize that you and they, the poor and the rich, the saint and the sinner, are all parts of the one infinite whole, which you call Brahman. Gentlemen, I have tried to place before you a few of the most brilliant points of the Advaita system. And now the time has come when it should be carried into practice. Not only in this country, but everywhere else. Modern science and its sledgehammer blows are pulverizing the porcelain foundations of all dualistic religions everywhere. Not only here are the dualists torturing texts till they will extend no longer, for texts are not India rubber. It is not only here that they are trying to get into the nooks and corners to protect themselves. It is still more so in Europe and America. And even there, something of this idea will have to go from India. It has already got there. It will have to grow and increase and save their civilizations too. For in the West, the old order of things is vanishing, giving way to the new order of things, which is the worship of God, the worship of Mammon. This thus old crude system of religion was better than the modern system, namely competition and gold. No nation, however strong, can stand on such foundations. And the history of the world tells us that all that had such foundations are dead and gone. In the first place, we have to stop the incoming of such a wave in India. Therefore, preach the Advaita to everyone so that religion may withstand the shock of modern science. Not only so, you will have to help others. Your thought will help out Europe and America. And above all, let me once more remind you that there is need of practical work. And the first part of that is that you should go to the sinking millions of India and take them by the hand, remembering the words of the Lord Krishna. Even in this life, they have conquered relative existence, whose minds are firm fixed on the sameness of everything. For God is pure and the same to all. Therefore, such are said to be living in God.